Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is reach. And today's verb is another suggestion from Robert, and I'm so grateful for this one. I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion. I really didn't think about all the different ways that we use this particular verb. So let's begin our discussion by looking at some of the general ways that we use this verb reach. The first is to just stretch out our arm in a particular direction in order to touch or grasp something. In earlier videos, I've described to you that I am pretty short. So this is an action I feel like I do every day, right? I have to kind of get up on the top of my toes in order to get a glass or a mug or really many objects in my home. A second way you might hear the verb reach used is to arrive at. This could be a physical place, could be sort of a mental state. Perhaps if you use GPS in a car or on your phone, even with walking or biking directions, you might have heard someone say, "You have reached your destination," right? It means you have arrived at the spot you were trying to get directions to. A third way you might hear the verb reach used is to mean to attain some level or succeed in achieving a particular condition. I work with a number of students who sometimes start in our school's lowest level classes, and eventually they reach our highest level classes, or they reach a more specific training program or area of study. So they've attained a different level of English communication skills. A fourth way you might hear reach used is to mean to make contact or communicate with someone. Now, with this particular definition, I feel like we hear it a lot in the negative. So, someone saying, "I couldn't reach this person," or "I wasn't able to reach this person," meaning I tried calling them or I tried emailing them, they didn't respond or they didn't answer. A fifth way you might hear the verb reach used is mean to influence or have an effect on something. So I know I feel like I have read so many articles talking about social media and how it reaches our teens in particular, right? It has this influence on them. And I think there, unfortunately, are a lot of studies now saying that influence is pretty negative. You should know that reach is a regular verb. To make the progressive form, all we need to do is add ing to form reaching. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Our base verb, reach, ends in this unvoiced ch sound. So when we add an ed ending, we're actually going to make a t sound as we say this past tense or participle form. Okay, it should sound like this: reached, reached. Okay, and I always like to point out I'm not adding an extra syllable as I say that past tense ending. Now, the verb reach is used in a lot of phrasal verbs, so we're going to focus our discussion on that today. You can see from the notes on my screen, I'm going to have 2 pages of notes of different phrasal verbs that use reach. The first one we'll discuss is reach after. This means to make an effort in order to obtain or attain something. An example of this could be, he hurt his back when he reached after the heavy equipment, right? So maybe something was falling, right? And this individual made a move to touch it, grasp it, as we said before, and injured himself in the process. Here in the sentence, reached after is an example of the simple past tense. A second phrasal verb you might hear is to reach back into. We use this to mean that we are drawing from, or maybe something contains elements of, or we're getting some inspiration from an earlier person or maybe an earlier period of time. Feel like we hear this phrasal verb used quite often in connection to the arts. And so, this sort of idea of getting inspiration from earlier artists or other artists in different genres. An example of this might be their latest film reaches back into the silent movie era. So, in this sentence, we're talking about a modern movie, and there are elements or inspiration from this earlier period in time of maybe about 100 years ago. Reaches back into, in this sentence, is an example of the simple present. Another phrasal verb you might hear is just reach back to. Okay, this would mean to begin and continue on from some point in time. An example of how you might hear this would be in the example sentence, this holiday tradition reaches back to 1837. Okay. Another simple present usage here, but it means whatever tradition or sort of action or series of actions started in 1837 continues into the present. Another phrasal verb you might hear is to reach down. That means we are extending or stretching ourselves in a downward fashion. So, an example of this, she reached down into the drain to retrieve her ring. Okay, so here we can kind of imagine someone putting their hand into a drain or maybe even into the pipe of a sink in order to find or get back her ring. A last phrasal verb on this page that we're going to look at is to reach for. This means, or the way we tend to use it, is someone is attempting to achieve something or to accomplish something or maybe even obtain something. An example of this, they've been reaching for promotions for the last 6 months. Okay, here's an example of the present perfect progressive or present perfect continuous. So we're talking about a group of people who have been trying to achieve a promotion, right? A better title, probably more money during this previous period of time. The next phrasal verb we're going to discuss is reach out. This can have a couple different meanings. One just means to stretch your arm outward in order to get something. An example of this, he reached out for his cell phone, but he couldn't find it on the nightstand. Okay. Here's another simple past tense example. Maybe you've done this as you're kind of waking up in the morning. I know I do sometimes, where I'm trying to move my arm in a particular direction to get my phone. A second way we can use reach out is to mean we're trying to help someone or we're trying to contact someone else for help. An example of this could be, I'm reaching out to local businesses to see if they'll support our fundraiser. Here's an example in the present progressive. So, describing an action that's in progress or something that's happening now. Many people do this when it comes to fundraisers. So, they'll call other places and say, could you donate maybe a free meal, a free item, something else so that we can raise money for this particular cause? Another phrasal verb you might hear is to reach towards. This means, again, we're extending one's hand outward, usually in the direction of someone else or something else. An example of this, I don't reach towards anyone's hands for handshakes any longer. Okay, so here's another negative simple present sentence. In this one, I'm talking about maybe my habit or my lack of a habit now of starting or initiating a handshake, right? Since the pandemic, I've stopped shaking hands. So this is my new routine. A last phrasal verb for us today is to reach up. This is kind of the opposite of reach down, right? So now we're going to extend something, could be our arm, our hand, and stretch it outward and upward. Okay. An example here: the small child reached up to her mother. Right. So maybe with this sentence, you can picture a little 2 or 3-year-old, right, putting their hands up, kind of like, pick me up, mom. right? This is another example of a simple past tense sentence. We're not going to do any additional verb tense practice because I know these videos are already too long, but instead we'll spend a few moments looking at some words and a phrase related to our verb reach. And the first word we're going to look at is just the noun form of this word. So we've got the same spelling and the exact same pronunciation. Like the verb reach, the noun reach can also have several different meanings or ways that we use it. So the first would be just to refer to the act of reaching out with one's arms or with one's hands. So an example of here. Can you give those glasses a reach? Again, I sort of picture someone struggling, maybe me, to get something out of a higher cabinet, which is something that happens to me quite frequently. A second way you'll hear the noun reach used is to refer to the distance to which someone can stretch out their hand. It's really common to hear this used in connection to the sport of boxing. And so you'll hear someone, like my example sentence here, say, the boxer's reach was 73 inches. So what we're talking about here is kind of fingertip to fingertip, and that distance. You might also hear that called wingspan, arm span. Same idea here. A third way we can use the noun reach is to refer to the extent or the range of an effect or influence. This really ties back to the last main definition we looked at earlier. So influencing, impacting something. So an example of the noun reach used here would be the reach of YouTube videos is remarkable. I've had this thought sometimes as I get comments from a variety of different people from different countries. I can't believe you found these videos and are watching them. The next word we're going to look at is the adjective reachable. And I hope you're noticing that suffix able, right? So that's going to play into our definition or our meaning here, able to be reached. Another way to think of that is with the word accessible or achievable. So an example of how you might hear this used, are you setting reachable goals, right? Another way to say this, realistic. Can you legitimately reach this, right? If I said, I'm going to become fluent in 20 languages, that's not reachable. Not at my age, not with my other commitments. I just know I would not be able to achieve that. The last thing we're going to discuss today is a phrase I think you might hear, particularly if you're taking other classes, and that is to reach a conclusion. This means that someone is making a judgment or maybe making a decision after some period of thought or maybe even a period of research and reading. An example of this might be, has the class reached a conclusion as to how to solve the problem? You might see this phrase given to you in instructions as different papers or projects are assigned to you. Your teachers and professors might ask you to reach a conclusion on a particular topic or in regards to a particular question. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.